So I'm going to call for apologies. We have got Terry Archer is coming in late, and that's the only apology. Is that correct, Laura?
That's correct.
So seeing he will be late, we will have to move that. So can I have a mover for that, please? I'll move that, and I'll second. Now I just wanted to go through, I'm sorry, I missed out our housekeeping for the, obviously everybody's at home, so please stay safe there. So if you could just mute yourself if you're not speaking, and if you wish, either raise your hand or use the little hand in the box there. And I believe everybody presenting is going to share their screen from their computer, so that will work well. Right. I'm now moving on to item 3, conflicts of interest. If we take those as we go, I'll now move on to item 4 on page 4, confirmation of minutes from the Regional Transport Committee meeting 11th of August. Can I have a mover for those, please? Anne, thank you. And a seconder? I will second. Right. Do we have any corrections to those? No comments? Do we have any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour, could our elected members raise their hands, please? Jackie, yep, thank you. Against? Carried. Right, I'm now moving on to item 4.2, receipt of action sheet, page 10 of the agenda. Now, we had a discussion about this before. There's a number of items on there. Unless anybody specifically wants to talk to one, I was going to take them all. Can I have a mover for those, please, before we discuss them? Thanks, David. And a seconder? Greg, thank you, Greg. So we're open for discussion. Does anybody want to discuss any of those 14 items on the action list, please? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of actions relating to Waka Kotahi, and I was wanting to give an update on those. If I can move through them very quickly. Laura has emailed the RTC a more detailed action register, which I've started up for Waka Kotahi, which gives an update of each one of these in more detail, including links to particular documents. So perhaps if I can just run through them very quickly, Chair, if that's all right with you.
Yes.
Sorry, Steve, I haven't sent them out yet due to the, receiving them at 9 a.m. I have not yet received them. So if you're able to run through them verbally, and then we can discuss what to do once you've done that.
Okay. So in the order that I've got them here, so there's one that wasn't on the list, which was where I think Councillor Court asked if we were looking at the local connections to the Aotearoa Rail Containment Terminal and what that means for Mauriwa. So Waka Kotahi has discussed the freight impacts of the new Aotearoa Rail Container Terminal at a high level with Kiwi Rail. I now understand that funding has been confirmed for Kiwi Rail, so we are now engaging with Kiwi Rail and the Far North District Council to consider a strategic investigation into the freight route integration. So that's definitely underway. Number 4 on the RTC register, there was a request around a report required covering Waka Kotahi meeting with ministers held at the NRC Council Chambers on Monday the 28th of June. So I've got confirmation here that Waka Kotahi did not attend a meeting with ministers on Monday the 28th of June at NRC. However, on this date, myself and the Waka Kotahi CE, Nicole Rosie, were at the NRC Chambers meeting with RTC, mayors, chairs and chief executives. So that one can be closed down. Number 8 on the register, there was a request here for us to provide a copy to the RTC of the New Zealand Auditor General's report. titled The New Zealand Transport Agency Maintaining State Highways through the Network Outcome Contracts, dated July 2020. So I've provided a link to that document. I've actually had provided that previously, but when you receive a copy of this electronically, there's a link there that'll take you straight to that document. Number 9 on the register, there was an action there for us to provide information on the independent audit taken on how Whakatahi spend our money. Now that audit is actually the Auditor General's report on the network outcome contract. So once again, I provided the link there, and we received that OAG audit, and we're focused on that report's recommendation. As a side, but we've actually, the OAG presented to the House of Representatives Select Committee on the New Zealand Transport Agency audit. And in that Select Committee presentation, the OAG noted that Whakatahi had made good progress on closing out the recommendations, but OAG will be meeting with Whakatahi over the coming months to monitor the remaining progress. Now, there is a video of that Select Committee meeting, and I provided a link for that you can go in and have a look at that. But basically, we are progressing it. It is in front of our exec in terms of making sure that we are progressing those, and the OAG is meeting with us in the new year to make sure that we're continuing to follow up on their recommendations. But we have taken all the recommendations on board and progressing them. There was a question too in that action around the response to the sustainability of the funding model question, and there, as I've previously reported to the RTC, there will be a funding review initiated by MOT within the next 12 months to support sustainable revenue sources for the Nltp, both in the short and long term. So the team has met over the last couple of weeks, and they're developing the terms of reference for that piece of work. Number 10, there was a request for a deep dive to address Northland road scabbing, etc. And we've got a presentation which Jackie Horoholt, our Regional Manager of Maintenance Operations, will be presenting to the RTC today. Number 11, the Councillor Martin asked a couple of questions around the Loop Road project progress. So is there a southern bridge still intended to be 4-lane? So the new bridge will include 2 southbound lanes, and the bridge is looking to be commenced in 2023, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on in our update. Item number 12, Councillor Court asked about the rural driver licence testing and mentoring in Northland, and to provide a report on the findings of the inquiry. So Whakatahi did consult on several improvements to the driver's licensing system back in 2019, which will be made through the land transport driver licensing rule. And the options on how to progress that work is still being considered. However, I can confirm that the government has a real genuine interest in accessibility and equity of the driver licensing system. We recognise there's accessibility issues, and that the driver licensing program is a public service but delivered through a commercial system, which is causing challenges. So the next step is that we're developing a driver licensing strategy, which will look at the procurement of that, and there's opportunities to work with other agencies in relation to the wait times in the short term. And I'm currently in contact with Edu as part of MSD to look at that. And there's one last one, which Councillor Wills asked to have a look at a recent fatal crash report. Once it's released, I'm still waiting to receive that report. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, before I open it up, Steve, I just want to confirm that you've sent all those answers to Laura, but she hasn't distributed them. But is there anything that you've just verbally updated us that is not in the report you've sent to Laura? It's all done, is it?
Correct.
Okay. So unless there's any specific questions, obviously, Steve, we can't see Steve's report, but we will, in due course, receive the comments from Laura. I see you've got your hand up, Anne. So happy to go to you now and take any questions on the action, especially on the Wakakatahi section. So, Anne.
Just one question in regard to number 8, please, Steve. The Auditor General 8. Sorry, I'm looking at multiple screens here. The audit into the condition assessment of the State Highway Network is dated July 2020. We did receive that. When can we expect to receive the 2021 one?
We haven't seen the 2021 report. So our report that we're working to is the 2020 report from the OAG, on which was maintaining state highways through the network outcome contracts.
Yes, my question is, when can we expect to receive the 2021 report?
Okay, I have to come back to you, Anne.
Thank you.
So, is that it's a good question, Anne. I'm just thinking if that needs to be actioned as a, well, you'll action that, Steve, will you?
Yep, I will.
We could record that in the, I think we should record that, Laura, and it's very difficult to read that schedule of action. I think it's under 8, isn't it? Okay.
I'll record that, Rick.
Thank you. So were there any other questions on the schedule of actions? No hands up. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Thank you. So I'm now moving on to item 5.1, page 12, Northland Regional Transport Funding Uptake. And I'm going to hand over to Chris for any comments. First, sorry, a mover first for those, please. Anne, and a seconder. Greg, thank you. And Chris, it's all yours. I'm just going to bring it up on my screen. Right, Chris.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, we'll take the report as read. As contained in the report, I'm not sure how much we can really get out of it, because the Nltp was only finally approved and released in September. That report covers very much July and August. So the information you've got, unfortunately, is very sparse, but we have included it in there. And I think for the December, you will have a far more accurate picture of where we're going and what we're doing. So unfortunately, that's the best we could give you with the information that we had. Happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think we did comment that, in fact, in the roads and transport article, that we didn't have, there was hardly any time to record on anything that actually happened from when the recent funding uptake. So I think that was covered in that report, and thank you, Chris, for that. And do I have any questions for Chris?
Our Chair, Steve here.
Steve.
Chris, just interested to understand if you see any particular risks in any of these activities that the RTC needs to be aware of and assist in unblocking.
Through the chair, from our side, the only risk we can see is any decrease in national and local share funding. I think through the RLTP and into the Nltp, all the road controlling authorities, council and yourselves, they put in the projects they wanted. Through the long-term plans, through the district councils, they've got their projects in there. So yeah, I think the only risk, probably two risks, is the maintenance of the funding we've requested and been approved. And the second is whether we continue to have on-off lockdowns with regard to COVID, because that's obviously going to have some sort of impact on the ability of staff to get out and do the work, particularly physical work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Steve?
Yes, thank you.
And Anne?
Sorry, that just raised an ancillary question. I was advised the other day that we were unable to get asphalt because it comes from the other side of Auckland and it's not considered an essential service, and therefore we cannot get a border exemption to bring it through. Now, I'm not sure as to the accuracy of that statement, but just reflecting upon that recent question and answer, is that a risk to our program if we cannot get the staff and the materials that we need through Auckland? And is there an action this committee should be taking to address that if that is an issue? Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Steve.
I might have to pass that one over to Jackie. So I'm not aware that that would be an issue. I am aware that some of our projects have had some issues around getting some of the physical resources across the border. In fact, we haven't been able to, which is understandable due to the risks of getting Delta into Northland. So we've had to work around some of those particular projects, but we're certainly not aware of asphalt being held up, but I can certainly take that on board and come back to you. And Jackie, did you want to comment?
Just
Thank
to
you.
add, Steve, we haven't had anything through our Fulton Hogan contracting to say that we've got an issue with getting asphalt from across the border. And
through the chair, Kelvin here, just reinforcing, asphalt in particular has not been an issue for us. The issue, as Steve alludes to, is on occasion getting specific resources. And with the risk of some of those Auckland-based and Hamilton-based resources coming up. So we've had no reports from contractors about asphalt specifically being constrained supply in Northland, so it's continuing.
Thanks, Kelvin. I didn't actually catch where you heard that from, Anne.
Apologies, I'm not used to muting and unmuting on Zoom. It's just taken me a wee while to get familiar with that function. It came from David Clamp in relation to our inability to complete PGF and TIF projects in Te Hiku, that the contractors had advised that we were unable to procure asphalt, and therefore the projects were suspended until such time as the border exemptions were relaxed. The same statement was also applied to getting our bridge experts through, who will do the design work that we need to meet our construction season. So it would be appreciated, I think, that if there is going to be an ongoing challenge with procuring the resources that we need, whether that's a physical resource in regard to materials or a capacity resource in regard to specialist subject expert matters, we need to have a heads up on that if it's going to impact on our delivery and our timeline. And we need to consider whether we have an advocacy role to the Department of Internal Affairs and the Prime Minister's office to get ahead of the game. Or we might miss our summer construction season. But I don't know how real or imagined that issue is, so I need some guidance.
Through the chair, I'll just add to that a little bit. There is specific projects that potentially are at risk because of resource availability, with that resource coming from Auckland or through Auckland. Generally, we've had, before the Hamilton levels changed and before Northland levels changed, we've had good success of getting resources through Auckland, through letters of support and MB exemptions, but understandably getting resources out of Auckland has been more of a challenge. With respect to asphalting in particular, the challenges that a number of our contractors are reporting is their specialist resources and equipment, given the volume of asphalt that work that's being done, often has to come from Hamilton and Auckland, and that's where the constraint is rather than the asphalt itself. So that may be the case with David's issue. where possible, we're writing letters of support to get crews through Auckland, but we obviously don't want to be the cause of Delta coming into Northland because we've wanted to seal a road. So we are managing those risks as best we can to try and put them through, but each of those will be reported from an NTA perspective through Greg's monthly capital works program report now that those programs are defined. So that will have the risk assessment against each of them. But there are a number of cases like bridges, as you mentioned, and asphalt testing and the likes where we are dependent on resources from Auckland.
Thank you. So before we go any further, did that finish that question, Anne, for you? You happy with that? Yes, I'll assume. Now I know
Sorry,
I've
Mr.
been a little bit preoccupied because David was contacting me saying he couldn't get on, but I see he's there now, so I can stop trying to text and email at the same time. So David, welcome to the RTC, and I did say you could have happy for you to introduce yourself, and we are pleased that you wish to attend the meetings for the rest of this year. So in the absence of you not getting on earlier, minute or so now would be appreciated. Thank you.
Good morning, Rick, and hello, everyone. I'm David Bennett, the National's new transport spokesperson. So just wanting to engage and take a bit of time and hear some of the concerns and some of the projects that you've see as your priority, and just get to know the people involved in the Northland Regional Committee, and just to get a bit of a feel for everything going on. So I'm based in Hamilton, and been Associate Minister of Transport in the past. In the last government we had, the National Party had. So looking forward to being able to support your region as much as we can. So here to listen and learn. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Rick.
Thank you. And you'll see on there we have Councillor Ann Court representing the Far North, Councillor Greg Martin from Whangarei District, Councillor David Wills from Kaipara, and Terry Archer, Councillor Terry Archer, who has just joined us. He is the deputy, and he is the other regional councillor with my honest. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. And what we are actually on, we've just actions 5.1 and 5.2. So if there are any questions on those, David, I'm sure you could use the chat box to ask them if you wish. Now, we didn't actually vote on 5.2, so I will just go for, I was going to go against, but I don't believe we can do that now. So we've got to vote. Can I have hands up for those in favour accepting 5.2, please? One. See Greg, David. Is that a hand? David, Terry. Thank you. Against? Carried. We're now moving on to operational matters. Item 6.1, page 18. Sorry. My apologies, I've jumped the gun. 5.2, National Land Transport Program Report. So, David, you haven't missed all of the financial reports. So, Jeff, I believe Jeff is speaking to this one, and we are on page 17.
Through the chair, I'll just introduce Dawn Spence, who's our asset strategy and management lead for the NTA. She's going to be doing this presentation on behalf of the asset team. Right, thank you. So apologies for that. I got a little bit off track, David, when you were coming on late. So I just want to confirm we're on 5.2 and we're on page 17. So thank you, Dawn.
Okay, tēnā koutou. Thank you very much for granting me the opportunity to speak. Please bear with me. I am not as familiar with Zoom, so I am trying to share my screen.
Perfect.
Come on. Can everyone see the complete screen or just a screen with the notes?
Yes.
We can,
We
your
can see it.
notes screen, Dawn.
Thank you. We were there for a while.
There it is.
Better. Thank you.
I think you're on mute there, Dawn. Sorry.
So while Dawn's getting sorted, we didn't have a mover for that. So I will move that. Anne, you happy to second? Thank you. Right, Dawn.
I do apologize for that. As I
We've
said,
got you now.
Zoom is a new forum for me, so I was going to start with since I started in such a positive way, but apologies for that one. Right, I want to give you a good news story. Across all 3 councils in Northland, the figures that were approved under the 2021-24 Nltp funding are slightly less than our requested funds, but are significantly increased from our previous budgets of 2018-21. This increase in our application has been attributed to our strongly aligned activity management plan, which was the quotation from Waka Kotahi when we submitted it, which applies the best practice planning processes and other strategies. I should also note that we have a considerable increase from the indicative budgets which were previously released. So going to the main section of our presentation, our Nltp funding categories, we have it in, as it were, 4 buckets of funding. We have the local roads maintenance, which is made up of maintenance, operations and renewals. We have our road safety promotion. We have our low cost, low risk roading investment activities, and we have our major investment activities. So what I'm going to do is present our graphs, giving an overview, and this is what the graph will look like. So the blue stack in the graph represents the previous 2018-21 approved Nltp funding. The orange stack in the graph represents the funding request made to Waka Kotahi as substantiated by our combined activity management plan, which again demonstrated applying the best practice and defined strategies for our assets. And then the gold stack represents the approved subsidy funding from Waka Kotahi for the 2021-24 Nltp. So jumping back to the MO&R, we can see that, excuse me, our Nltp is increased from the 2018-21 budgets by 26% for Far North, 22% for KDC, and 15% for WDC. With KDC and WDC, the funding reduction of 5% and 3% respectively was mainly under the renewals activities, whereas the 9% reduction in requested funding for Far North it was split under maintenance, operations, and 70% was under renewals. If we move then to the road safety promotion, again, the 3 graphs. Excuse me. It's not COVID, it's a nervous cough. The primary increases that we requested for was to set up an in-house NTA coordinator and to continue the existing alcohol and drug, young driver, speed, driver education, high risk and restraint programs, as well as in the Far North to add in a new REAP in Kerikeri. Unfortunately, 6% of the requested funds in Far North was rejected, as that was due to the heavy transport, the trucks license program, which was rejected. It's not included under the subsidy permissions. With KDC, the 52% reduction is actually for the bike skills. Apparently the bike skills was requested, but it was viewed as an investment increase, and we actually requested it under the low cost, low risk program. So we are still attempting to get that portion of works back into our operations. Then we have the low cost, low risk roading investments. So these are the activities that are under $2 million. This was a slight change from the previous 2018 to 21, as each individual project had to be defined and requested. It was no longer just a bucket of money, as it were, for projects to be identified by councils. Waka Kotahi had also requested under this application a GPS alignment rating for each individual project, which was then moderated upon. And it was classified under very high, high, medium and low. Waka Kotahi had set the national funding priority levels, and therefore several low and medium rated low cost, low risk projects which were below the set funding priority levels did not receive funding subsidy. In the Far North, the works requested was 58% of the value of works approved in the previous period, but the amount approved was 45% of the previous. Most of the projects which were below the priority funding level and therefore did not receive subsidy were the new footpaths and shared youth paths and recreation tracks, various pedestrian access tracks in urban areas and safety improvements, the Twin Coast Discovery walking tracks, and various cycleway improvements and linkages, including destination facilities. There were bus stops and shelters, ride shares and parking facilities, lighting improvements, new road traction seals, and the 3-year planning for the next Nltp for high-risk rural road intersections and resilience programs. Those were the major activities which were rejected or did not reach the set funding priority levels in the Far North. For KDC, the value of works requested was virtually the same as for previous, and the graph actually shows a negative increase, but that was because we are comparing like for like, and we had to move the bridges, which in 2018-21 Nltp were under low cost, low risk, and are now classified under MO&R. So for comparison purposes, it is a reduction. The 6 projects which did not receive funding under KDC, 3 of them were for walking improvements under new footpaths, pedestrian mid-block crossing facilities and pedestrian barrier removals. There were 2 cycling improvement packages, which was sump replacements on cycle paths and the Dargaville River Path, and there was 1 LED infill lighting project. With WDC, there was a total of a 23% increase in requested funds, but a 20% increase approved from the 2018-21 Nltp. And the 14% of projects which did not receive the funding subsidy were 3 LED infill lighting projects. That is in Hikurangi, Waipu and One Tree Point. And then there were various pedestrian safety and pedestrian crossing upgrades. Then we move on to the major projects or the investment activities. And I can't get the slide to move. There we go. So for Far North, these are the extracts that we have received. Their funding is categorized as probable, possible, or not included in the 21-24 Nltp. In essence, a probable project should proceed once the appropriate business cases and supporting materials can be submitted and approved by Waka Kotahi. A possible project may proceed once the appropriate business case and supporting materials are submitted and secured further funding. And projects that have not been included, we believe, are declined and may be pushed forward to the next Nltp application. So for FNDC, there are 3 probable cases, 2 of them business cases and 1 improvement to the AMP, and 3 other activities which are not included. Moving to KDC, we have again 3 probable cases and 1 not included. The probable being the Dargaville River Path, that's the implementation, and Mangawhai Shared Path implementation, phase 2, and the Mangawhai Network Operating Plan will be a business case. The Kaihu Valley Trail Cycle Path was not included in the 21-24. And for WDC, this looks like a lot more applications, so apologies if it's not readable, but I hope everybody can see that. There were many more probable combination of business cases and implementations, generally for the same projects, so you will see the name twice. There were 2 possibles, which was the waterfront to city centre connections, and then there were 4 which were not included. And that brings me to the end, and thank you very much for your attention. And if there are any questions.
Right, thank you very much, Dawn. I'm sure there'll be a few questions. Before I go any further though, I just want to apologise to David Bennett, and also that I did not introduce the chair of Regional Council, Penny Smart, who was incognito in the end. She was hiding behind her screen, so she's there now. So sorry, Penny, I got everybody else who was on the screen, so apologies for that. Right,
Through the chair, just
yes.
before we go to questions, can we just add that this is intended to provide the RTC with an overview summary. The actual detailed outcomes of the Nltp have not been yet presented to each district council. That's happening in October and November meetings. So we would prefer, if possible, I'm getting a biscuit, we would prefer, if possible, that any detailed questions from elected members be held off until those respective council meetings. We can comment at a high level at this stage.
Thank you. I hope that point will be taken on board. Thank you. So I had a question that solves that question for me, Kelvin, so I don't need to ask mine. David. So David, no, you've gone. Anybody else? Oh, David, you're back.
You're on mute there, David.
Right.
Can you hear me, Chair?
We can hear you, thank you.
I was going to say that I know it's appreciated that the National Party voting spokesman's on, but the internet spokesman would be appreciated as well, considering how this meeting is running. My question is that the 3 districts applications were put up, but I know that the Kaipara Council staff also applied under the Regional Council umbrella for a number of projects in the low risk category, and I haven't been able to access those. Is that information available for this meeting?
Right, Kelvin, perhaps that question's directed to you.
I don't have it.
Through the
Sorry,
chair, there was an application to Waka Kotahi for funding for highway crossings and bridges for cycleways. I'm wondering if that funding was approved or not. I haven't been able to get access to that information.
Hand it over to you, Kelvin, to start with.
Through the chair, so those are specific Whakatahi requests. We were looking into that for KDC. I haven't heard the outcome of that as yet. Jackie, you may be able to confirm whether that's been approved under low cost, low risk, but it was definitely a Whakatahi submission rather than an NRC submission. Or Dawn may have even found it. We can take it offline and confirm for Councillor Wills if no one on the call has the answer.
No, I don't, Calvin. So.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks. So
I don't have either.
No, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Steve, you got the comment? No?
No further comment.
Jackie. Sorry, Anne.
I don't know where the raise your hand function is on this, so if someone could tell me, I'd love to find it.
It should be in more or reactions.
I'll keep searching.
Here we go.
3 questions. Will the State Highway Program form part of the presentation to each of the territorial authorities, not just their local work? Obviously, the councillors in each of the 3 territorial areas have a profound interest in the State Highway Network Program of Works. So will that be covered?
Dawn, that's for you, is it?
I believe it is. We will not be presenting from the NTA, the state highways. That would be back to Jackie or Steve.
We
sorry,
through the chair, we have been prior to level 4 and level 3, we had been working to try and coincide a Whakatahi presentation with the territorial authority one. I'll just need to confirm with each council and Steve whether that's made the agenda or whether that will need to be in a follow-up meeting. It just got a bit disrupted with the level changes and the likes, trying to confirm meetings, but it is on the agenda to get Whakatahi in front of each council to talk about the state highway programs for the next 3 years.
Thank you. That takes care of that question, Anne. Any further questions?
No, Rick, I had 3.
Oh, 3. Okay, sorry.
By way of clarification for our guest, David Bennett, and any members of the public that may be watching, my earlier question related to the audit of the State Highway Network, which we received, the 2020 audit, which showed that Northland was lagging behind under the One Network Road classification level of service compared to the rest of New Zealand. So we're really keen to understand whether or not this National Land Transport Plan will address that deficiency. And I know Steve's been advocating really hard on our behalf and doing the good hard yards in Wellington. But we would just like some governance comfort that at the end of this round, we're going to see an improvement in the levels of service that we're currently experiencing on the carriageway and on the network. So that's just some background for why I asked that question. Another question I have is, obviously the government's tipped in a lot of money to get this program over the line, and we're really, really grateful for that. We are mindful that $2 billion of that is a loan and it needs to be repaid. So we need to understand the impact of what that actually means on the delivery of this program and any impact that may have on the 2024 program. So we need to be alive to that now and considering the impact of that. Steve might like to make some comment on that. And finally, while we aimed high and the Far North took the biggest hit with the 78% of our overall program funded, and Steve, I would like your feedback on this. My initial conversation with Steve was that the reason that our mode share program was rejected was that it was based primarily on population. And if we continue to base mode share on population, that is always going to have a negative impact on the regions, rural and provincial New Zealand. So in an area where we have no alternate choice, so it's a car, because public transport was not funded, walking and cycling was not funded, footpaths were not funded. We are going to continue to rely on cars, which goes contrary to the government's recent announcements on getting us out of petrol and diesel vehicles and into electric vehicles and walking and cycling and using alternate mode share. It would be really helpful for us as a region to understand what we can do to address that moving forward, because it's not sustainable simply to base funding on population, where, if I can be real devil's advocate, if you're a metro, you have buses, taxis, Ubers, you have trains, you have all of those at your command already. In rural and provincial New Zealand, we don't have those. So if we're not going to fund our alternate cycling and walking through the National Land Transport Plan, what is Plan B? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I think that question is dear to the hearts of all of us, and that was really my question around cycleways, but I am going to send the detailed one to Kelvin for that. So it's a very good point, Anne, and Steve, you have the floor to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. That's a very big question you put forward there. And so, first of all, that consideration around paying back the loan. So you're right that the 2 billion is a loan, and that has to be built into future Nltp periods. So that is exactly why Waka Kotahi is working with the Ministry of Transport around looking at a sustainable funding model going forward for all those very good points that you raised, where we're promoting more efficient fleet, we're promoting mode shift, which means that we'll see a reduction in fed and ruck, and that is 90% of Waka Kotahi's revenue that actually pays for the Nltp. So we're very aware that we need to look at that model to make sure that we have enough funding available to meet the needs of our communities and the future needs of the land transport system. But the network's growing, it's becoming more complex and more expensive to fund. We're seeing cost increases, etc., etc. So the terms of reference, I understand, are being developed right now. And we're working very closely with MOT to get that piece of work completed. In addition to that, there's the whole congestion pricing question has been rolled into it, and other different ways of having different funding mechanisms as we've seen offshore. So all that piece of work is going to be rolled in together. In terms of the mode shift in regional New Zealand, that is absolutely a really good question. And I think that, the government policy statement is very clear for urban centres, as you rightly point out, in terms of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Tauranga, Hamilton, etc. But what does it mean for regional New Zealand, who are very dependent on vehicles? And it's certainly a challenge that we need to work through. And I think that when the government's climate action plan, reduction action plan comes out, I think it's next week, that is going to give us some more clarity around, well, what does that mean for regional New Zealand, and how do we as an RTC react to that? And I think it's a very important piece of work. In my update I'll give shortly, I think there's 3 things that we really need to focus on. And it's around, well, 4 things actually. It's around delivery of the Nltp, it's around climate action, or what it means for us, it's around sustainable funding model going forward from Northland, and it's also around safety. So I think you've hit the real issues on the head. That's really going to dominate the conversations over the next 3 years about what we need to do to deliver on those. But in terms of your cycle paths in the far north, my understanding was, as part of the moderation, they really focused on those shared user paths which will get people out of vehicles and use those cycle paths, and it's where they're parallel to a state highway, where a lot of the far north shared use paths put forward were, I guess you call trails that wouldn't necessarily get people out of their cars traveling to and from work or whatever it may be, recreational areas, but it was more around a tourism or those people visiting the area. So that's why the decision was made not to fund those particular ones, but happy to take that offline and go down in more detail with our experts in that field.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Anne. And I would certainly like some more detail around the cycleways, Steve, myself. Obviously, I think every region suffered in that respect in terms of having their funding delayed. So we would certainly like that. Thank you. And you're happy with those answers? Thank you. Unless there's any further questions, don't see. David.
Thanks, Chair. Just one quick question. On the actual dollar numbers that were highlighted in this release, I went through and analysed our Kaipara district headline numbers, and I'm just wanting confirmation that those actually included funding that wasn't intended to be used within this 3-year period. For example, the Dargle pathway is 2.1 million in the headline news, but it only appears that there's an implementation funding actually within the 3-year period.
Right, I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Can anybody answer?
Sorry, the question, Chair, is that after the headline news, numbers are being put out there. Is that money all allocated to be used within that 3-year period?
Right.
So from if it's a headline perspective, in terms of our media releases, yes, it's the 3-year Nltp investment. If you look at the tables on our website, there's a total, which is the whole phase or the whole project, but also you've got the spend per year over the next 3-year period as well. Also something to look at is that the activity is normally broken up between pre-implementation and implementation and the business cases. So there's sometimes the funding across more than one line. But Councillor Wills, I'm happy to catch up with you and go through that in more detail if that helps. Catch up with you offline.
Yeah, it seems that all our contentious questions will be answered offline. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, David. Greg, have you got a question?
Yeah, I have, yeah. If you could. Can we have electronic monitoring of all these cycle and walkways? Because we've put a fortune into it, and we have the predictions of what they're going, how much use they're going to get, and we have huge construction costs. We just money into all of these things, and then if we don't know what the usage is and we continue building more, then we really need to know where we are on it. I've been asking this question at our council for a really long time, and we get predictions or estimates or this should happen, but we have not had any hard figures. And some of the cycleways are working really, really well, but they appear to be busy a lot of the time, and other ones are just deserted. So if we had genuine monitoring of them, we would know where best to spend the money, which may well be on some of the ones that are not getting the funding, because the other ones are presumed to be going to be used for people to get to work. And I'd just like to know, and other people have asked me the same thing, why aren't you building more of this type of walk cycleway instead of these other ones? So if we had electronic monitoring and we could see the usage of it, then we would know we're putting the money in the right place.
Thank you, Greg. I believe, Dawn, do you want to answer that one, Dawn, do you?
If I may, thank.
Yep.
If I may, thank you. Councillor Martin, thank you for your question. As part of our strategies, just to keep you informed, we are currently working to develop a monitoring strategy on cycleways, and I literally have a meeting programmed on Friday to see the technology to implement some of this. So we are working towards it, but we don't have the figures today, but we are genuinely working towards it.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks for that answer. Greg, it's a good point. I certainly know our cycleways are being used extensively down here, and that's why I'm concerned that funding for the real cycleways has been removed for the next couple of years. So, no further questions? All those in favour, please, of accepting 5.2. Hands up. Against? Carried. I'm now moving on to operational matters. 6.1, page 18, rural driver licensing, testing and mentoring in Northland. And I believe Nicole is speaking to that one. Could I have a mover for that paper, please? Anne, and a seconder. Greg, thank you. It's all yours. Nicole, thank you.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I take the report as read. I do just have a couple of updates that I wanted to quickly go through. So firstly, I did mention a project that we were working with the Ministry of Social Development that unfortunately did not go ahead because there were COVID complications, obviously, and it required us bringing licensed testers from Auckland into Northland, and the COVID protocols around that just wouldn't allow that. So that one has been put on the back burner for now, but we're still working with MSD really closely to try and build, I guess, try and understand a bit of map of all our providers in Northland and how best to use our funding and the opportunities that we can to improve the licensing space for Northland. So that relationship's really promising. I also mentioned that the police had a role going for road licensing in the mid to far north, and I believe they've made an appointment for that role, but they might want to speak to that further in their update coming up. So those were my updates for that. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. That's a very detailed report too, and I appreciate that. Right, Anne, you're first.
I found the hand functions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good on you.
First off, I need to do a huge shout out to REAP for their outstanding results. 95%. That's off the chart. So that's worth publicly recognising. Just in regard to the earlier conversation that Steve raised with us about a review of driver licensing testing throughout the country, I was concerned to read the failure rates that show up in that graph. It's quite alarming that class 1 restricted showing a 47% fail rate. So I'm just highlighting whether or not we need to understand what's driving that failure rate and whether that's region specific and we are an outlier, or whether there's something inherently wrong in the way that we are preparing our young people for their driver's license, and there's something that we should be doing to improve those statistics so they're more prepared when they sit their test. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Are you going to reply to that, Nicole, or?
Through the Chair, yes. So obviously we work with our contractors to try and provide mentoring for these people going through their restricted licenses, and we've only got so many mentors available to get through a pretty large population, but that's something that our contractors are always working on, trying to find more opportunities to assist people and help them and get them prepared for a test. So we hope to see that failure rate decrease. I'm not sure nationally what the failure rate looks like, but I know that for our region that statistic's pretty disappointing. But
I can add to that, Chair.
Thank you.
So yes, it is very disappointing, and our regulatory team is very aware of those failure rates, and that's the last thing we want, is to see those numbers like that. So we're doing a deep dive into understanding better about what is causing those as part of our review around the whole driver's licensing processes. This is the first time that a lot of people, make contact from a land transport perspective. So it's important that we set them up for success. And, you know, if they go into those tests and they get knocked back, then there seems to be a high proportion that don't then go on and actually get their license either, which is another road safety risk. So that we're doing everything we can to make sure that, looking at the whole system, that the trainers are training to a certain level, that we set up our people for success that go and sit their driver's licensing, that it's accessible, there's equity in the system, and there are no wait times. So we're looking at that whole system to make sure that we provide better outcomes for road safety, because that's all part of, you know, Road to Zero, is making sure that, you know, people are well trained and competent and capable to drive on our roads.
Thank you. It's a very valid point, Steve, that it is their first experience with the agency. So, and you do want to make it a positive one. And to be honest, it's their first experience for a number of those people for any sort of, if you like, experience with authority. So it's really good to get it positive. Thank you for that. Greg.
Yeah. One of the things that should be looked at, I think, is the booking system in Whangarei, where quite a few people don't even turn up. And so they don't, when you ring up and say, can I go on the cancellation list, even the hospital, you can organise that. I'm living proof, fortunately living. And they have a system where you can go on the list straight away. And if you hit the right time, you get in, which one of my granddaughters was perfect for her. And that's what alerted me to that. But you all know about me being on the Road Safe Trust for 17 years, and I volunteered to go there. So this is one of my passionate things. But with the COVID and the 6 or 8 week wait, why can't we upskill or contract some of the driver trainers to do this as well? That's the second part, and just get more people able to do it on a short-term contract basis or whatever. People that are doing it in and out, like Nev Man and those sort of people. And the other thing is, my grandson was in Auckland going to get his license, and the boys from his school said to him, don't go to such and such a place because you'll have trouble. One of his friends went there 3 times, failed every time, went to another place, and they said, you're an outstanding driver. So there also needs to be, with the failure rate, there also needs to be monitoring of the people who are maybe being a bit pedantic with certain groups. Just feeding that out.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, so perhaps I just add one comment to that, is that Wakatahi monitors the waiting lists in all areas across New Zealand, and we're aware, and as I mentioned earlier, working with Uru from MSD in Northland particularly. We were looking, as mentioned by Nicole also, was that we were looking to bring some Auckland testers into Northland, because our Auckland testers aren't working at the moment. However, we took on the recommendations from Eru that because of the risk of the Delta variant, that we did not want to bring Aucklanders into Northland, which is totally understandable and acceptable. We are looking at other options nationally to utilise other trainers, including the Army, and we're just monitoring those areas where there are very long wait times, and there are other regions throughout New Zealand which have far longer wait times than in Northland. So as I mentioned earlier, we're really focused on this at the moment, and that the commercial arrangement that we have doesn't seem to be the best outcome for this public service that we need to get right. So we need to take our time to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Greg. Thanks for the answer, Steve. Any further questions? And look, Nicole, thanks for such a detailed report. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Thanks very much. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. I'm now moving on to item 6.2, Northland Road Safety Update, page 25. And Ian is speaking to that, I believe. Thank you. I'll just bring that up myself. Right. Ian.
Yeah, Morena. Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Hey, if I could just, through the chair, just have the report taken as read, please. And before I pass on to the two presenters that will follow up, which will be Sergeant Terry Phillips from the police and also Nick Marshall in the Road to Zero safety presentation, I'll just update the crash figures that are on the page 25. And sadly for us, we've seen a big increase nationally from the printed number on that page. We've now sitting at 256 deaths year to date. And if we're looking at the state highway figures nationally, that's 113. And if we look at the local roads nationally, that's 142. When we look at the Northland statistics, sadly, we've just crept up recently to 25 deaths for the year. And, you know, the most recent one was that motorcycle rider up at Cowrie, and I'm sure the police will give a bit more information in their report. But what we're also finding is that across our state highway network, 17 of our 25 deaths have taken place on the highway and 8 on local roads. When we're looking across our districts, we've year to date, we've had 10 deaths in the far north, 6 deaths in the Whangarei district, and 9 deaths in the Kaipara district. But if there's any questions about the report, please ask them at the end. But if I could now pass on to Terry Phillips from the police, and I understand he'll also be introducing the new road policing manager. Yeah, we welcome the police and Anne-Marie, and also appreciate the tremendous ongoing support we get from the police.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Oh, sorry, I was at the back. I was thought I wasn't going to get introduced there, Ian. Thank you. I was just having a little look over our fatal board. I'm just trying to figure out where because we're on our one, it's got 23. I'm just wondering if I'm missing a crash or not. I know there's ones that don't count in our district. There wasn't 2 out of our district that count. Just trying to think either I've got it wrong on my board or not. Anyway, I'll get into it. So just going over, obviously, since the last meeting, there's been a fair few fatal crashes since then. I'm just going off the latest, which was our outside Perry Valley Road, Kaitai, SUV off-road, hit the tree over the bank. Our driver died, obviously. Alcohol was in his system. Seatbelt unknown at this stage. Say Highway 1 Kaitaia, 50 metres south of Kitchener Road, we had a Carvey Bridge for a 17-year-old male passenger being flung out of there and dying. That's still at ESR at this stage. Then we had the truck roll up in Broadwood. So that will still be going through ESR as well. And then the most recent one in Kauri with the motorbike. The other update for everyone, I don't know if anyone's got the presentation, but just going through it, is our COVID checkpoints. So obviously since the last RTC, we've been heavily involved in COVID checkpoints down on the southern border. So that's where most of our resources been. Just some updates from us, and we've just got some, just so everyone can kind of understand what we're dealing with down there, because I know a lot of people will be hearing around breaches and whatnot. But We are stopping a fair amount of traffic and turning a lot of people away and breaching them, and there have been a lot of arrests down there. So we've had couples come up that have been wanted for breach of bail. Oh, there you go, Ian's sharing. So just down on the next one, Ian. Just with the, yeah, that one there. So just going over that one. So we've had couples come up, they're breaching a bail, not to reside with each other or associate with each other. So we found them to be breaching court conditions. Both were given COVID-19 ions and turned south. Had a man that was coming to fix a vinyl in the shower in Hurrikanui, turn around. So and also had 21-year-old coming through with gang links, traveling with his partner, young children. Search of the car, found firearms and rounds in it, meat cleaver, baseball bat, and they were charged with possession of ammunition, offensive weapon, and given a breach and turned around. And those are all I can fit in at the moment. We're still getting people obviously trying to drive through farmland, gangs coming up. So we are getting a lot of people down at those checkpoints, and there is a whole heap of volume down there. As of recently, yesterday, I believe it was, we've flown up additional officers from around the country to backfill those checkpoints down in Tihana. So yeah, they're just going to be ongoing for us for a long time until we sort of get out of this I don't even know when that will stop, to be honest with you. I can't give you a time or date when our contribution to those checkpoints will stop. So that's just going to be ongoing. If I move to the next slide, Ian, it's just going over our Northland Stats. So I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of a show of what we're doing in terms of our infringement notices and what we're trying to achieve here. So if you see on the left there, our restraints offences detected. So we're not doing too well in that one. So if I go over it, the red line is where we want to be, the blue line is us, and the grey line is the national average. So obviously restraints wise, we're not there. Mobile phones, we're below where we need to be as well. So in regards to restraints and mobile phones, we haven't met the target, but I am doing some operations around that in town where we can detect those offences. If we move to the next slide, which is where we're doing really well, our speed detected on rural roads, we're obviously above the national average here in Northland. Still haven't met the expected expectation, but we are tracking above the country in the detection rate. Drink driving over to the right here, we are above the national average of drink driving offences detected, so we're doing good in that space. And if you look at drug driving, which is bottom left corner, we are above or well above the national average in drug detection, drug driving detection of offences, so we're well above that. And our speeds detected with between 1 and 10, we are meeting national average there, and we still need to increase that, so that we're doing ongoing work around targeting our speed in between 1 and 10. The next slide is our mobile road safety buses, which just arrived this week. So these, we got two new ones. So what we're going to be doing is having one down here in Whangarei, one based in the mid-north, and one in Kaitaia. So we're just going to get that all kitted out and get that distributed around. Moving to the next slide, I would have had, this is a Drager. These are our breath testing devices. What I was planning on doing was to bring them to the RTC meeting, and so that everyone can sort of have a look around and see actually how these work. I just thought it'd be beneficial for you guys to all see how our new breath test machines work. So when we get a chance to meet again, I'll bring that to the next one, and you guys can have a look around that. Now I want to introduce obviously our I'll touch on just what Nicole said around our driver's licensing first. We have appointed a driver's licensing officer in the mid-north. That's Neil Vartan. He's doing a lot of work in the schools there. So he's been on board for the last week or 2 weeks now. So I'll be obviously linking him in with Nicole and Reap and everyone else going forward. So that's obviously ongoing for us, and there's still some work on us actually getting a few more people in that space. It's just we just need to write a bit of a proof of concept or business case around that to increase our numbers. But I will now introduce you to my new lovely leader, Inspector Anne-Marie Fitchett.
Hello, everyone.
Don't think there's a video there because Ian's sharing. Right?
Well, I'm trying to get out of that.
We've lost already, have we?
I think yeah, we're here. It's just there I am. Here's Anne-Marie.
Hi, everyone.
Happy to take some questions.
Right. Do we have any do we have any questions? Oh, I was going to actually end, but Steve.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome, Anne-Marie. Nice to meet you. Just a question around your graphs. It's great that you're, doing really well nationally above around the speed and the drink driving and the drugs, but I notice it's still below your targets on the red.
Yeah, so
you just talk about, what we're doing to achieve those targets, please.
For those ones, yep. So obviously COVID's been a big hit for us, and our National Road Policing Centre know that, and that would be obviously communicated back to Waka Kotahi in that national space, because a lot of our resource has been plugged down in those border checkpoints. So we've taken a massive hit around that. So before COVID was put in place with those checkpoints, what we're looking at doing was actually getting all our traffic alcohol group, our rural policing group, to start doing our breath testing, our checkpoints, just to ramp up where we've lost the opportunity due to the checkpoints to try and start bolstering that back up. And that's still a plan, obviously, when we get our resource back. But what we're doing in the space of, we've got highway patrol and still other units around that are going to be obviously contributing to trying to achieve that. Obviously, we don't have a lot of resource around that if we're contributing to our checkpoints, but we'll do what we can to try and raise that.
Kapai.
Thank you. Now, any other questions? David.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two questions. One I want to ask and one the Mayor's told me I have to ask. My question is regarding, and before I ask it, I appreciate what the COVID barrier is doing for Northland's safety. So thank you. But my question is regarding how to avoid the perception and the growing perception in the community that there's targeted profiling of the people that are being investigated as they come through. And I'm asking that because a number of people I know have said it's so easy to get through, and yet other people who, to be blunt, are Maori appearance are struggling or have been challenged. How do the police avoid that public perception?
Well, to be honest, Dave, I haven't heard of that, but realistically, from my point of view, is everyone that's going through that checkpoint should be stopped and should be questioned on where they're going and should have the appropriate paperwork. That was very clear from my briefing with the Auckland staff that were there, and any of the staff coming out from. So I can't answer that other than everyone that's going through that checkpoint should be questioned and stopped and should have the appropriate paperwork to come through. It's pretty hard to control what's going on down there, other than giving the expectation of what I want to see.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just raising it because it's the feedback I'm getting from people in the Kaipara.
Yeah.
And now the question that the Mayor has asked me to ask on behalf is that we're getting an increasing number of complaints from people in Mangataroto, Paparoa, that the speed limits are not being, that on State Highway 12 that people going through there are not respecting them, and we're getting an increasing number of complaints from the residents in that area at the lack of support and controlling that. I'm just bringing this as my role as councillor.
I think we did have Anne-Marie was dealing with one recently where I think a resident from Mangatoroto was writing into us around speed cameras and approved sites for us. So what we did was we got our sergeant to go down and because we do have to get it nationally approved. So we went down to see if the site was appropriate. That site that he had suggested wasn't appropriate due to the speed, the volume of traffic, and also where our speed limit signs were. So what we can do is we can put an increased presence of highways through there, and I have no issue with us policing State Highway 12 with a more visible presence with what we've got.
Thank you. Like I said, I was asked to ask that in my role in this committee.
Appreciate it,
very much.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Good questions. You better report back to the Mayor. Look, I just want to comment on, I can imagine that the checkpoints are taking a phenomenal amount of staffing time. And obviously other things will suffer, but we'd certainly appreciate what you're doing on the border. I think everybody would back me up there. And I'd just like to say regarding the road safety buses, they look, that photo is awesome. And I think that's a really, really good initiative. So it'll be great to see. I think it's like we say, education's the big mover. And if we can get people out seeing those buses, it's an awesome introduction, especially when we know that when this lockdown eases in whatever form, there's going to be a phenomenal number of people on the road. So well done on that, and thanks for your report. Thank you. Do you have any further questions? And Anne-Marie, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and I hope it all goes well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So did we move that report, Laura?
It's still
no, we didn't. And there's one presentation still to go, Nick Marshall's presentation.
Fine. Okay, we'll do that at the end. Thank you. Apologies for that. Right, Nick, thank you. Hand it over to you, Nick.
Morning, everyone. Just trying to work out how to share screen in Zoom. I see Ian's done it for me. Thank you.
If you'd prefer to show your screen, I'm happy to let you do that, Nick.
I'll attempt it. If it works, I will do so. Otherwise, I might call on your help. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. So I'm just doing an update on the Road to Zero interventions from the council's point of view. So Whangarei, Kaipara, Far North district councils. Can't seem to work out how to change screens. Might have to go to you presenting, Laura.
Okay, were you trying, obviously, your keyboard arrows?
Yes, and using the mouse.
Okay, yep, I'm happy to give it a go.
Just found it, thank you.
Cool.
So we're working. No, thank you. So we're working to implement the Road to Zero safety strategy for New Zealand, 10-year strategy, which has a vision of no one killed or seriously injured on our roads, with a specific goal of reducing the DSI's death serious injuries by 40% within the 10-year period. So with that, our key focus area in here in terms of the government policy statement, developing a transport system where no one is killed or seriously injured. And with that, in the Road to Zero strategy, the two key pillars that we're working on are infrastructure improvements and speed management and road user choices. So that's the work that Nicole, Ian and others are involved in. In terms of our funding, which a lot of this has already been covered by Dawn, we pretty well with all our infrastructure requests got 100% of the funding requested, and that was built in conjunction with Waka Kotahi using the pipeline tool to ensure that our projects were targeted to the risk and aiming to achieve that 10-year goal of 40% DSI reduction. With the road safety promotion, as Dawn already outlined, we received 100% of Whangarei and Kaipara's requests, but only 48% of KDC's, but the bulk of that is in the bike skills area. And we are working with Waka Kotahi to try and get that additional funding for year 2 and 3. In terms of what we're going to be delivering, speed management or speed limits, the colour-coded areas on the map are where we are putting our focused area. That's last year, so year 0 in terms of investment. Year 1, we're working on the North Hokianga up into Ahipara. Year 2, across to Russell and around the coastal areas there. Year 3 through Kirikiri Bay of Islands. In Kaipara, year 1, we're focusing on the Mangawhai area. Year 2 will be along the west coast, Poto Peninsula. Year 3, the bulk of the land in the middle between Dargaville and Mangawhai, leaving only a small portion for next LTP. In Whangarei, we have actually implemented quite a few areas, small catchments. Year 1 of this LTP, we're going to focus on the rest of Cove Road along with the Mangawhai area and the heads, and then move into Russell, Turakaka Coast concurrently with Far North, and that will mean overall about 50% of Far North, 50% of Whangarei and 75% of Kaipara will be treated in this LTP period. In terms of infrastructure improvements, we've got 3 intersections in Far North and these high-risk rural roads. In terms of Kaipara, these high-risk rural roads, and for Whangarei, these intersections and these high-risk rural roads that will be focusing investment over the next 3 years. Some of these roads will get additional investment over future LTP periods. And this is an example of one of our high-risk roads in Far North to be treated this year. So looking at curve advisory and improved delineation. And I'd like to finish on a bit of a success story. So here's one of the guardrails we've installed on a high-risk road, Whangarei Heads Road, and it shows that it has saved a death or serious injury. And similarly, a more recent installation where it struck only a few months after it was installed, and given the drop-offs and hazards in this area, quite likely a death or serious injury that it saved. Any questions?
Right, that's excellent, Nick. Really good percentages, and yeah, it's really good to see. And I do like the success stories. And thank you for obviously my area as well. So it's looking really good. Any questions, please? Oh, no questions. Well, Nick, thank you very much. It's a detailed report, and I'm sure everybody's had a read of it before, and it's always good for you to go over it as well, because it just clarifies a few issues there. So thank you very much. Now, I haven't got you on my screen. At least I have Laura, so I didn't move that. So I will move that in a seconder. Thank you, Greg. So all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much for the police presentation and also your one, Nick. That's stunning. Thank you. I'm now going on to item 6.3, page 57, Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency report to Regional Transport Committee. And I'm asking Steve to speak to that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve.
Would you like a mover and seconder of that now, Rick?
Sorry, thank you, Laura. Yes, I'll move it. Can I have a seconder? Greg, thank you. Thanks, Laura. Right, Steve.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. Can you see the presentation up on the screen?
Yes,
right?
we can. Thanks.
That's great. So just wanted to take the report as read. Just going to go through, I guess, our key message a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jackie, the Regional Manager, Maintenance Operations, who will run through a bit of a deep dive into the maintenance and operations in Northland, because I know that's a subject dear to your hearts. Look, I think I've talked about it earlier, really, which is around, I think the conversations over the next 6 months and 12 months are really going to be dominated by, focusing on the delivery of the Nltp. It's absolutely critical that we hit the ground running, that we deliver what we said we were going to do, and we need to be working efficiently and productively to make sure that we get a return on every dollar we spend. So we really need a good focus on that. It's around the climate actions report, production plan, and how we can respond to that. It's around sustainable funding model. But I think also from what we just heard too, we really need to focus on safety. In Northland, we all know that it has a terrible safety statistics, and we need to get that 40% reduction. And I know there's a lot of work happening, but we really need to focus on that. So just a little bit around the road to zero. So to achieve the reduction of deaths and serious injuries on our road, I think it's really important that we monitor and report against the outcomes that are identified. That holds people to account, accountable for the delivery of the strategy. And there's 10 reports that are going to be delivered. The first one's just come out, and it can be found at the MOT website. And the highlights over the past year, I think, is around the land transport drug driving amendment bill, which is good to get out there. Accessible streets package that covers the changes to enhance the safety and accessibility of footpaths, bike lanes and cycleways. There's the Land Transport Amendment Act 2020, which was the amendment which enables provision for this setting a speed limit rule, which will bring into effect the new speed management framework, which the RTC will be very involved with. There's a Safe Vehicles program, which is aimed at increasing awareness of vehicle safety ratings, which is really, really good, especially for young people buying vehicles. There's the National Road Safety Advertising Programs and Training, which includes guidance and training for road safety professionals, as well as driver training and licensing support. So there's a lot of good things that are happening from a policy perspective, in addition to the good work that we've seen our teams do from an infrastructure and speed management perspective. We're actually developing a major public awareness campaign, which is going to start a new type of conversation about road safety. And we're really aiming to disrupt complacent attitudes we think is happening around safety, and really get out into the marketplace that, it's just not acceptable, people dying and being seriously injured on our roads. So this Wakatahi campaign will be the first time Road to Zero is going to be introduced at a large scale. So we're using television, web and print to get to the general public. And we're scheduled to go live in 2022. And I'll share more information with you as we go, as we get nearer that date. But I'm pretty excited about this campaign. I think it's going to generate a lot of barbecue conversations, which will be really good. Just continuing with the safety theme, we're preparing our work for the 83 kilometres of corridor from State Highway 1 to Whangarei to Wellsford to make it safer. So there's 3 sections that we're focusing on there. There's the central, which is Whangarei to Wellsford, and that's we're currently refining and developing the detailed design. And we're looking at our surveying, geotechnical, ecology and other investigative works that we're starting to begin. And we're currently having conversations with landowners and affected communities at Ruakaka and Waipu about how the project will progress. So we're looking to start some early works in 2022, which could see wider centre lines in a section of flexible medium barrier and side safety barriers near Ruakaka School. In the southern section, which is refining and developing the detailed design, that's all in progress. And once again, we're having conversations with stakeholders are underway, and we're looking to commence that in 2022. Once again, it's around those wider centre lines and barriers and improved lane marking and signage, which would be good. and in the northern package, which is just on the south end of Whangarei there. So the rescoping of that project's happening now, since the 4-laning project was cancelled after the government decided not to proceed with the 4-laning of the highway. So early planning work is underway on the safety improvements proposed for that section, and we have done quite a bit of work around taking the existing work that was done as part of that 4-laning project and making it more real for this particular project. So we'll provide more information over the coming months on that. Work on Loop Road. So we're just waiting for the weather to settle. So we're looking to do the final servicing before Christmas through there, which will see that piece of work, which is really great. And we're currently, in relation to the second bridge, which we've talked about quite a bit at the RTC, we've finalised the position of that, and it will not preclude 4-laning in the future, but the position of that bridge has been finalised, working through the final design and working through the property acquisition, which we all know can take some time to work through. Over the past 3 years, has seen the biggest maintenance program delivered by our team.
Steve, sorry, are they all coming up on your screens?
No, I'm not. I've just left it on this screen because I don't want to
fine.
go through.
I'm working off my own screen. Okay, so we're on page 68 of the agenda now, for those who are looking.
And together we celebrate the completion of the State Highway 10 Waipapa Corridor Improvements Project, which was making a safer community, which was a great event to celebrate. It's really important we celebrate these together. And depending on COVID levels, we've got the Kaio sod tuning event on Friday morning. But we're all waiting this afternoon for the government's announcement around COVID to see if that event will go ahead. We'll have to postpone it if we still remain in level 3. And all Northland Capital Works projects are progressing well with no significant issues or delays, which is good news. So look, the presentation's been provided there for you. If you've got any questions, happy to answer it. But I'd like to hand over to Jackie, who'll take you through the next section. So thank you, Jackie.
I can, I'm finding my unmute button. So kia ora koutou. For those who may not know me, I'm Jackie Hori-Holt. I'm the Regional Manager for Maintenance and Operations for Te Taitokoro me te Tamaki Makaurau. And I have got some feedback just with regards to the Auditor General's report. So before I start, I thought I'd just round that out. So the Auditor General report that was done, there is going to be no further updates. There won't be a formal outcome in the next year or for the next couple of years. The recommendations within that we've already started work on as waka kotahi through our contracts, but we do provide regular updates back to the Auditor General with regards to where we are. So that's probably just to close that question out. So Steve's running my slides for me, so we're doing a collaboration thing. So Steve, can we go to the next slide, please? So we've got our key messages here for this presentation is that in our last 3 years, as Steve alluded to, we've seen the biggest programs delivered by our team, which has been fantastic. And we will continue to build on those programs over the next 3 years, especially in our pavement and surfacing, because we've had some real feedback around the corridor and what it looks like and what it feels like for our customers. So nationally, our condition matches the classification of our roads. We do acknowledge that there are definitely some areas to address, and in my presentation, I'll take you through a bit of a deep dive, which we've done nationally, but also what the outcomes are for Northland. We do have a plan in place so that we can focus and monitor and address the areas, and we do that collectively with our contractors. So they've been part of the journey that we've taken at the beginning of March with regards to really having a look at the network condition, like I said, not just in Northland, but nationally. And our team do a great job to manage the very challenging network that we have here in Northland. We've seen some very dry summers and some storm events, and in my reflections of the times that we do have across the network seems to come in the cycles of 2014, we lost Muramaku 2019, we lost, or 2017, we lost Lemons Hill, and also in 2020 we had the Maramako storm event. So these do create challenges for our team. What I can say is with our contract that we do have the ability for us to bounce after those, or bounce back after those storm events. We're seeing a lot less potholes that are coming out when we do have those major storm events. So that's a really good outcome from the team, and it does account for the emphasis that we've placed over 3 years for the pavement and surfacing. Our teams also make sure that with our funding, we prioritise our spend in the right place and intervene at the right time. So where we are spending our funding for Northland, as I said, we put a draft investment in to maintain our level of service, and we were provided the total value of $91.5 million. It's been great that government has provided us with an extra $2 billion investment across our Nltp, and for maintenance and ops there has been an increase for us, and we'll see that particular number be a significant increase with regards to our pavement and surfacing. So we're just working through those numbers. So currently under our draft program, we had maintenance, we had $59.9 million that's put aside for our reactive maintenance. But in our pavement and renewals, we've got $31 million that we're going to be spending. And we've done a bit of a breakdown because in the auditor's report, they talk about the classifications of roads. So we've got the primary collectors, which is significantly the majority of the roads that are within Northland. So our spend for those roads are for $16.6 million. So, and I think you talked about where we put population and the areas. The primary collectors are definitely an emphasis for us for our maintenance program. On our regional collectors, which is from Whangarei to Kawakawa, we have $3.7 million that we've put aside for that particular corridor. Our national strategic route, which is from Wellsford to Whangarei, there is $6.9 million. And we've also got the high volume area that carries a lot of our freight, which is Puhui to Wellsford. What I do want to do is just give some context, is that for the state highway nationally, we've got over 11,000 kilometres of road, of which 15% is the state highway, and that total length in New Zealand for the state highways carries 50% of our general traffic and 72% of our road freight. So our state highways are really important for us. Just with regards to the previous Nltp, with the emphasis for government in maintenance and operations, we've seen an increase in our funding to 30%, which is an excellent outcome for us and for our team. Can we move to the next slide, please, Steve? So just with regards to where and what we're doing across the network, I've provided 2 maps, and look, I'm really sorry, it is quite tiny, but it does give you a little bit of a feel for where we're actually planning to do our major rehab works, our resealing and our asphalt across our contract, sliced into where we are for 2021 for this year, and also for the Nltp. So you'll see that we're actually going to be across the majority of our network over the next 3 years. The next slide, please, Steve. So in the auditor's report, nationally we have 3 measurements, and we'll continue to measure this, and this is part of our feedback. So on the slide to the right, we have our roughness, which is our surface, and the roughness shows that Northland, in comparison to our NOx, we're actually not the best, but we're sitting in there. So ahead of us, the worst networks are now for our roughness, especially sits in the Gisborne, northwest, Bay of Plenty, East Waikato and Taranaki. So those particular NOC regions have got similar forestry, they've got ports that they carry to, so you can see where we sit in that ranking from our roughness perspective. And then in our rutting, so this is where we've got some pavement deformation, which sits underneath our surface. It actually benchmarks us. So for rutting, we have about 2% of our Northland network that sort of sits above that 20%, which then looks at our safety side, and we need to we intervene in those stages. So it actually shows very similar to the roughness grades. Gisborne and Gisborne North and West are very similar. They also have very similar classifications for our roads. So what our results show, these two particular graphs, that Northland network is not the worst in New Zealand in comparison to our other networks in our contracts. Can we move to the next slide? So one of the other measurements that we do is our skid resistance, which is important to addressing our death and serious injuries. And I've got a graph here that shows that with the investment that we've been doing over the last 5 years since 2017, that we have a greater focus in this area, and you can see that we're actually trending in the right direction with regards to addressing our skid resistance across our network. And our investment for this year is $1.6 million in order to address our survey results, and that's really around the money that we invest into put signs up on corners to slow down through there. We prioritise working collectively with our maintenance contractors, our programs and our permanent works. So noting that the crashes that we do have in Northland are around our RIDS program, which is our restraints, impairment, distraction and our speed. I've got a nice picture there of it is of Ruapehu. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one of the skid of our vehicle that does a network drive over. So we gather this particular data that we have to help us to analyse and make sure we've got the evidence and we're investing in the right place. And this is our scrim truck. So our scrim truck does it at the same time every year, and for Northland is around in December is when our scrim truck runs. So they actually do over 22,000 lane kilometres. So they start from the North Island and they carry on down to the South Island. And these are the tools that Waka Kotahi and the team and the contractors have in order to make sure that these measurements that we take these into cognizance, and they can actually divide the road up into 100 lengths for us to look at. Can I go to the next slide, please, Steve? Look, Waka Kotahi, we recognise there's been a number of areas of a network that we need to address. This photo was taken in July, and it's out of the newspaper through Moirawa, where we've had some scabbing. So we are reviewing the scabbing to understand better the defects and the why. And I've just had a member of our national team, who's been out looking at the road to provide us with a real deep dive, just specifically around the scabbing, and like I said in the photo, whilst it may look bad, it's not a safety issue, and we have a plan to address it, and also a plan to prevent it further occurring on our state highways, working really closely with our contractors, because safety is our priority. The plan is to address it through our resealing program, and the outcome from the draft report that I've seen to date is that it's not a particular contract, it's not contractor, it really varies around where it has occurred. We've looked at the quality, and we've also looked at the makeup of the road through these sections. So we've done a real thorough job with regards to that, and we will be sharing this because it's not just a Northland state highway issue, it's across all of our state highways and local roads nationally, so we'll be providing that. Can we go to the next slide? So our plan moving forward, look, we've received a lot of feedback, customer feedback, and we've listened to that. Like I said, in March of this year, we did a national call to action project that was driven out of not feedback, not just only from councillors. My new boss Neil was here just before Christmas with the freight group and the feedback from the freight group. So it wasn't just Northland alone, it was nationally. What our team did was we actually drove the network with a real customer lens, and in our Northland team, including our contractors, so they were there as well. We had a safety lens. We picked up 370 items, and we've got a bit of a pie graph that we're actually monitoring this. Because of our drive over, we were able to complete $1.6 million worth of work because of to address the bridge approaches in June 2021. So what it did find out is that under the investigations required, the majority of that sits under our scabbing and our general ground movement. So that's the report will be able to address a lot of the things that we're still investigating. What we have completed and our completed 28% there has been our bridge approaches and some subsidence that we had across our network of general maintenance, and the program pavement repairs. Like I said, we've got programmed work to address, and that's our resealing program that I showed the maps for. We had a bit of an other, and that's around, we have a lot of third-party contractors that come onto the state highway, landowners and utilities, and we're working through a process around how do we address to make sure we're getting the right outcomes when we're dealing with our third parties when they come onto site. So we do have a plan, so Waka Kotahi's call to action plan will address our remaining items, and which are our scabbing sites and our ground movement sites. Thank you. Hei kone mai, is there any questions?
Thank you, Jackie. It's very good. I see Anne's had her hand up for a while, so I'll go to her first, and then I've got a few comments if anybody else as well. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Just trying to understand these graphs a little bit and to put some context around that. We recognise that the cost to deliver services in Northland, we know this is higher than elsewhere in the country. The cost to deliver per kilometre is higher. We know that the National Land Transport Funding allocation is 4% of the total budget, which is equal to 4% of the population, but I'm not sure if that's actually equal to the percentage of the network that we have to address in Northland. So what I'm looking for as an elected member is consistency in improving the level of service that we need and consistency in improving the level of funding that we need to drive that. So in doing that, I ask a lot of questions around auditors' reports and condition assessments so I can see continuous improvements. And what I'd really like to see is a vehicle that could survive election cycles so that when my time is done and somebody else sits in my seat, they can see where we've been and where we're going, the journey that we've been on. I think that's really important. So I'm a little disappointed to hear that there'll be no further audit updates from the Auditor General, because that's critical. And please don't take this the wrong way. I don't mean any disrespect, but as a road controlling authority, we are audited within an inch of our life by Waka Kotahi to make sure that we are spending every single dollar wisely. I want that same level of scrutiny applied to Waka Kotahi. So as a taxpayer and a ratepayer, I can get governance comfort that Waka Kotahi are being prudent with the funding that they have. So these tools are really, really important. So when I look at these graphs, Jackie, I'm glad I don't represent Gisborne. That's about all I can say from looking at those graphs. But Northland is not looking flash. And I don't know what is acceptable. So I look at Auckland and it's way down the bottom there. And you would expect that. It's a high quality network carrying millions of vehicle movements a day. I would expect to see that. And I go over to Gisborne and it looks terrible. But what I don't know is what's an acceptable level of service in regard to rutting or roughness. And you might be able to clarify that for me, but these are great graphs and I'd love to see these continue. But if we could get some clarity on those graphs about what we would expect to get out of our not contract, a line through the middle of it, I like the police had on their slides, that would be really, really great. And I looked at the skid resistance one and I wasn't sure whether the blue line or the red line, I didn't know whether we should be above or below. I'm looking at that as a lay person, probably not quite a lay person, but I don't know if 0% is good or 7% is good. I just don't know which way those go. So it'd be really, really good to get some descriptors to help Joe Average Citizen understand what it is that they're looking at there. And the fact that the scabbing report is going to be made available, that's fantastic. But I do have a question in regard to the scabbing report, and you say it's not a safety issue. I showed that to my husband in the agenda when it came out the other day, and he said, well, I won't tell you what he said. Steve knows my husband, so he can probably imagine what he said. The polite version is, what is that doing to the tyres on my car? What is that doing to the maintenance on my car? Is my car wearing out faster because I'm driving over that kind of surface? So I've got my questions, I've gone all around the bush. Can we implement a system so that we can see gradual improvement in our network? Can we introduce a system that explains what those measures look like in plain English? And can we get an understanding of whether the scabbing on the network, which is prevalent in Northland, is actually having an adverse impact on vehicle repairs and maintenance? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Those are that's a really good questions. And look, I'll start from the question just with regards. I'll start with the scabbing question first. And when I mean it's not a safety issue, when we do skid resistance, it's around the flashing and the shine. I think there were two photos. There was a flashing and there's a thing. What we're trying to address is we've got those areas where we've lost complete chip. This particular area from a technical pavement perspective is that we've just lost the top chip with regards to that. The plan we have in place is to, now that we've got this report, is to stop scabbing moving forward. So we understand what's been causing the scabbing and make sure that there will be no more scabbing. Look, scabbing across for our contractors, working our way forward and with the programs that we are delivering and that reselling and making sure that we can prevent further scabbing on our network. And look, there's been historical places, and I'm not sure whether you would have noticed, but they did do a trial just before June, just with regards to some smaller chips. So there's some technicality around the report, but Fulton Hogan are really upfront. They've done that. If there's quality issues with regards to this outcome, then they actually front up and they pay for that themselves, so it's not coming back. With regards to the wear and tear of the car, that's probably something I can't answer specifically for the scabbing issue. The auditor's report, and I know that your auditors, and I know Tony comes around your teams with regards to that. Steve, I think you may have been talking to our internal Waka Kotahi auditing team around looking at the state highway in the same way that we look at the local council roads for auditing, just for like. And I know that Steve has had that conversation, so that will be picked up with regards to that. The Auditor General's report was a combination of, with the REG, we were looking at efficiencies in 2017, and Waka Kotahi put forward not only working together with our contractors, a contract. So the auditor's report was part of the contract and we're our network. So it was a bit of a combination of both. Whilst there won't be another report, we still update and take on board the recommendations. So for Northland, we're currently sitting on, I think we were NOC version 1. We have made some changes to our contract with regards to our contractors being able to address safety and putting some new measures in. So we are evolving our contracts as we go to be able to address the recommendations that were in the report and our reporting. But these particular graphs are consistent with our reporting that we have, and they're also part of our contract that we have. So to be able to give us some measurements that we can look at. So yeah, does that help you, Anne? Have I answered your questions?
Yes, if we can modify those graphs so Joe, every citizen can understand them, that would be great. And I think, Rick, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to consider, not today, but I'd like the committee to consider some kind of messaging that we need the modelling to demonstrate that there is a prudent spend of taxpayer and ratepayer money in the network. I mean, I'm not going to hold up the Herald as the fountain of all wisdom, but when you pick up the Herald and you read that, you know, transmission gully is now double what it costs, I want to know that someone is actually putting a lens over things like that, because these things may or may not have an impact on the money that's available for the rest of the country to spend on their network. So there needs to be a level of financial prudence, a probity test at what's going on at Waka Kotahi, and that's not a criticism, that's just good governance and good financial acumen. And I think we need a level of reporting that shows over a long period of time, not the 3-year window of the LTPs or the Nltps, but a long period of time, that the money is being fairly and equitably distributed around New Zealand based on need, not on population, based on network condition assessments. So we're all achieving a fair and equitable level of service. And I'm going to repeat, I'm not suggesting we're not, but I just think it's really good governance that we do that moving forward. And I think that's enough from me.
Thank you, Anne. And I think we'll take that on board with Laura. Get Laura to make a comment, and I'll have a word to Tony and Chris later on about this, if that's all right. Thank you for that. Now, I am conscious of the time, and it's 11:37. I know a few of us have got another meeting at 12. I just want to see if there are any further questions on those. Are great questions, Anne, and always appreciate your input. But I'm conscious that we're sort of getting on time a bit. So, any further questions? Look, I just want to. Oh, David, fire away.
A really quick question for Steve, because he jammed it through before, and for time. Loop Road, I know it's not in my area, but he quickly whizzed through that update on that intended improvements, and he used the phrase, "The bridge does not preclude it being a 4-lane bridge." What does that mean?
4-lane highway, you mean?
Yeah. So what that meant was that should the 4-laning be built in the future, that the bridge that we'll be building now will not preclude it. So in other words, we are putting the new bridge on the alignment that if the 4-laning did get built, it would still be utilised effectively and efficiently in the whole corridor. So in other words, we're going to build this bridge, and then in 10 years' time, the 4 laning's built and we've had to rip the bridges out and rebuild them. So the bridges will be built in a place where, should the 4 laning be find funding in the future, then the bridges will be built and the bridge will be built in the right place.
But its initial, really quickly, the initial intention is for it not to be 4 lane between the existing and the new bridge.
Sorry, it is going to be 4 laning, but from the roundabout is a 2 lane roundabout, so it's 2 lanes in both directions. So 4 lane in total from the roundabout to the south side of those bridges.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I finished.
I think the chair's frozen.
You might have to take over, Terry, if he's frozen.
Hello, Anne. Can you hear me? Right. Have we got any further discussion on that there? And your questions were answered?
My questions are far more deep than can be answered today, but I'm sowing the seeds that I am looking for governance excellence here in the space, and I am going to be relentless.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. Anybody else got any comments?
Sorry, Terry, I'm back.
Hello, Rick.
All right. Look, I don't know what you heard of that. Thanks. Great. Look, I just wanted to say, Steve, congratulations on the Road to Zero program. Did you get that before? And look, I think it's super important that we educate in the first instance, and that's one of the staff who have been out to Waipu and Ruakaka. They've had a real bow beating from the ratepayers groups and the public. So if you could pass it on, that would be great. And Jackie, in terms of your update, very interesting about the scrim truck. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It must be a daunting task doing thousands and thousands of kilometres. So thank you for that. So, and being no further questions, the report be accepted. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now moving on to item 7.1, our final item. It is the draft regional public transport plan. There are, on page 77, there are 3 recommendations. I'm happy to move these. As I've spoken to Chris and Tony, I've seen the alterations to the plan, the amendments and adjustments from public relevant authorities. So I'm happy to move the 3 recommendations on page 77. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second it, Rick.
Thank you, Terry. So, is plan. We have discussed it at length. It is a final. It is a tick off. I'm very pleased that it's got to this stage, and pleased to move the 3 recommendations accepted for public endorsement and approval for public release. No questions? All those in favour, hands up, please.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And I thank the team for doing this public transport plan. It's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to the results. Now, I'm moving on to the final of the discussion today, and I want to thank you all for your attendance. David, I hope you've got David Bennett, I hope you've picked up a little bit on the issues that face us in Northland, and no question you would have heard about them that, and I hope you appreciate the insight you've got into those. And thank you, Penny, as chair of NRC, for attending the meeting. I will see you everybody on December the 8th at our final meeting, leaving to Laura to do the closing karakia. Thank you all for your attendance.
Chair, could I just raise one point before we finish?
Terry.
I'm sorry for my late arrival at the meeting this morning, but item 4.1 and subsection 3 there, a recommendation at our last meeting that the Regional Transport Committee obtain a quote to undertake a review of the cost of the proposed four laning. Now, I believe the reason that was put in is because there was a substantial variance between what we were quoting as a committee. The figure that we were working on, I think, was about 600 million. The figure that the government were quoting when they cancelled that project was over $1 billion. Now, we decided, it was moved by Court, seconded by Wills, that we seek a review of that, of the cost of that four laning, so that we had a definitive figure to work from. Have we ever received that figure?
So, Terry, before we go any further, just can you just direct me to the page, please? That was on.
That was on page 9.
Right. So Councillor Court did distribute the documents. That's recorded as an action and the links that she referred to in the discussion. That was the only action we asked from that meeting, my understanding, and that is covered in the action plan. But it's a good point. I don't know if you've got anything to say, Steve, about that, have you?
So through the chair, that was an action put on the NTA.
Yeah.
So we have had subsequent conversations with Councillor Court. Jeff Devine has had some of them. I'm not sure if Jeff is back on the line. He had, but we do believe that to be quite a problematic action for a external review to be done on costings when we don't have access to the same information and design and effort that's been put in by Wakatahi. So we, are you there, Jeff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Jeff here. Sorry, I've been in and out all day. My connection's not very good today. So yeah, Anne has provided me with a box full of further papers relating to the issue. We're working through those papers to determine what level of information we have, and we're trying to get someone to give us a price to do a review. As Kelvin just mentioned, the extent of the review is dependent on the volume of information that we hold and whether or not we have enough, but we are still working on that, and we'll come back with a response as soon as we can.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you for filling that out, Kelvin. And that was a good question, Terry. So we will note that and we will give you an update when we hear more. Thank you for
Thank you, Chair.
that. Okay, thank you. So Laura, up to you to do the closing karakia. Anne, have you got a question? Sorry. Anne, your hand's up.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly just to reaffirm for Terry that as a Regional Land Transport Committee, we don't have any authority to spend any money. So what I was seeking was an indicative sum, so we could take that to the Merrill Forum, we could take it to Northland Forward together and all of the territorial authorities in Northland to see if it is something that we wish to pursue. So it's very much in its infancy and a work in progress.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for the update. And thank you all again for your attendance. No other questions? Laura, it's up to you.
Third time lucky.
Thank you. Third time.
Thanks, right. Unahia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara tangata. Ko ia rā I rongo, whakaerea ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, hui e, tae ke.